Hello, welcome to Guide London. My name's Nick Salmon. I'm a Blue Badge London tourist guide and a member of the Guide London website, which represents around 600 London Blue Badge tourist guides. Now, at the moment, because London's still in lockdown, although it's starting to ease a bit, we're unable to do our usual guiding activities. So what we've been doing is our broadcasts here on a Monday, a Wednesday and a Friday on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter to try and bring a little bit of London into your homes. We've been going for about 10 weeks now. If you've missed any of our broadcasts, then go to YouTube or Facebook. You can find them all archived there. We've covered history, we've covered culture, and we've covered some of the great buildings that you can go and see in London. Now, if you were with us last week, you will know we've launched a new service from Guide London, a new service which some of our guides are offering, and that is virtual tours, a way you can experience some of the sights of London without having to leave your front room. Virtual tours can be just a one-to-one with you and the guide, or you could invite your family. If you've got relatives living abroad, you could meet up with them for a virtual tour of one of our great buildings. Or if you belong to a club, you can arrange a tour for your club, so you can come in and we can show you some of the great sights you can see in London. And then hopefully when the lockdown is lifted, we'd love you to come and see them in person. At the end of the broadcast, I'll tell you exactly how to broadcast, how to book one of our Guide London virtual tours. But last week, we gave you an example of the types of tours that you could see. We looked at the National Gallery, the great picture gallery in the very centre of London, where some of the world's great works of art are exhibited. We then walked down through the centre of government in London, Whitehall, and we went into Westminster Abbey, the church where we crown our kings and queens, well known for royal weddings over the years. Well, today we're going to give you another 3 examples of the type of virtual tour you can book with one of our guides. And to do that, I'm joined by 3 London Blue Badge tourist guides. First of all, we're going to hear from Amber Tallon. Now, Amber has recently qualified as a Blue Badge guide. She's wearing her new badge proudly. Amber, tell us where you're going to take us to today.
Yes, I'm going to be taking you around St. Paul's Cathedral today.
Brilliant. We look forward to that. When Amber's shown us around St. Paul's, then we're going to join Aaron Hunter. And Aaron is going to take us on a walk through part of London. Where are you going to take us, Aaron?
I'm going to take you on a walk through the City of London, the ancient City of London, towards the Tower of London.
Brilliant. We'll look forward to that. And finally, we'll be joined by Will Mitchell. Now, Will is another newly qualified London Blue Badge guide. So, Will, which building are you going to talk about today?
Hi, Nick. Today I'm going to be taking you around the Tower of London.
Tower of London, a great building that everyone wants to go to when they come to London. So we look forward to that. So if you've got any questions for any of our guides or any questions about how virtual tours work, then simply put them in the comments. We'll try and answer them if we can. But while we're doing that, we're going to hand over straight away to Amber. Amber's going to tell us a little bit about St. Paul's Cathedral. Over to you, Amber.
Great, thanks, Nick. So yeah, I'm Amber. I'm a newly qualified Blue Badge guide, and today I will be taking you around, giving you a taster of St. Paul's Cathedral. And we can see a picture of it there. It's beautiful dome. It's a very recognizable part of London. I think partly because it's still so visible in London today. Until the 1960s, it was the tallest building in London. And even today, while it's slightly dwarfed by some of the high-rise development around it, there are still many protected views. So it pops up quite a lot as you wander around central London. And if we look at 2 different pictures of it here, so I've already pointed out that dome that a lot of people think of when they think of St. Paul's. But the picture on the right-hand side is of the west front. So in normal times when the cathedral is open, this is where you would enter. It's got its 2 turrets there. And then the statue you can see in the foreground, that's Queen Anne. And she was the monarch at the time that the cathedral was completed in 1711. And St. Paul's is important nowadays because it's known as the nation's cathedral. It's where we have big events commemorating, celebrating, and memorializing parts of our history. It's where we have big royal events like Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897. And then much more recently, our current Queen, Elizabeth II, had her Diamond Jubilee there in 2012. It's where civil rights campaigner Martin Luther King preached on his way to collecting his Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. But it's not important just for these huge events celebrating the great and the powerful of history, but also the importance that St. Paul's has for the general population and how it brings the wider community together. For example, this was where we had the memorial service for the 7/7 bombings in 2005. And then more recently in 2017, a service to commemorate the 72 lives lost in the Grenfell Tower fire. And they rang their bells again just on Sunday to mark the 3-year anniversary. And so it's a working cathedral. And in normal times, when we don't have a pandemic, they are holding up to 30 services a week. But they haven't forgotten that community responsibility, even during lockdown. And they recently launched their online book of remembrance for victims of COVID-19. And so you're able to add your loved one, regardless of religion, whether they were Christian or not. And there are plans as well for a physical memorial later on inside the cathedral as well. So let's have a look at the building a bit more closely. So here we can see it in situ in the City of London. And the history of the cathedral didn't start in 1711. It goes right back to the 7th century when we had the first church built on the site. And there have been many versions since then. The one just before this was known as Old St. Paul's, and unfortunately it was destroyed in the Great Fire of London in 1666. And that destroyed 4/5 of the City of London, including Old St. Paul's. And so we needed a new one. So we're just coming around to the west front now that we saw a picture of before with the 2 turrets, topped with pineapples as a symbol of welcome and hospitality. And this building, this version of St. Paul's, was designed by Sir Christopher Wren. And he wanted a monumental dome that would be seen all over London. But he was also aware that if he made it as large as he wanted from the outside, you wouldn't be able to appreciate it from the inside. It would just be too far away. And so what we're looking at here is in fact not one dome, but a clever construction of about 3 domes. So you've got the outer one that we were just looking at. You've got an inner one that is closer to the ground and can be appreciated from inside. And then a brick cone that supports the weight of that very heavy lantern on top. So very clever construction there. But I mentioned Old St. Paul's, and we have an image of it here from the 16th century. And it survived a remarkably long time. It was started in 1087 under William the Conqueror, and he wanted to make his mark on London and on wider Christendom as well. He wanted the largest cathedral. And if you've been to St. Paul's, if you know anything of its size, it might be hard to imagine that Old St. Paul's was actually longer and the transepts wider than the current building. And the image that we're looking at there, you can see the spire as well. Unfortunately, this was destroyed in 1561 during a storm, but until that point was actually the tallest spire in Christendom. And you can see, compared to the other buildings and churches of London that barely come up to the start of the windows on St. Paul's, how the building really would have made a mark and dominated the London skyline. And so if we now head inside our current St. Paul's, we can have a look more at that interior design. It's all English Baroque style that you can see here in the nave, so that central aisle that goes through the cathedral. And English Baroque is characterized by its links to the classical world of ancient Greece and ancient Rome and the inspiration it got from there. You can see those columns that line the nave, and also in its decoration. But the Baroque is also all about drama. And the drama here is created through the contrast between light and shadow. And English Baroque was very much about intricate design and very regimented symmetry. But if we make our way slightly further down the nave, so here we're almost directly underneath the dome. So you can see inside the dome, we have those monochrome paintings by James Thornhill. But if you look beyond that, you can see suddenly we've got a lot of mosaics. You can see them in the spandrels, those triangular shapes just above the archway, and then also further down that central aisle. And these were added in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So there are stark contrasts to that very cool, clean colour scheme that we had behind us. And they were added after Queen Victoria visited the cathedral, and she commented on how dull, dingy, and undevotional she found it. And so they were intended to liven up the design. That white cross that you can see in the first image, that's one of two. There's another one on the other side of the aisle, and they're both by artist Jerry Judah. And he wanted to commemorate the horrors of warfare. The white color of it is reminiscent of the graves that adorn many the crosses that adorn many war graves, particularly associated with the First World War between 1914 and 1918. But those weird protrusions that you can see coming out of it, those are models of modern buildings that have been decimated by conflict. And they're images that we quite often see on the news, and we can become quite desensitized to them. But Judah here forces us to take another look. And it's one of St. Paul's is full of modern art and art generally. It's one of the reasons why I love going there. You can see here an image of how they transformed the dome last year for British artist William Blake's 262nd birthday. That's his painting, The Ancient of Days. And they use art as part of their wider mission to bring the community together and to connect with anyone who may walk through their doors, regardless of religion. And it's just this importance that they hold to reaching out to the community. So now we're going to leave St. Paul's. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll have a wander through the City of London with Aaron.
Well, thank you very much, Amber. I'm also a reasonably new Blue Badge guide. I qualified just over a year ago. And I have the great pleasure of taking you through the ancient city of London. And when I say ancient, it's an ancient city that goes back almost, in fact, to Roman times, almost 2,000 years. And it's been a medieval city. And you know you're entering the city of London when you see a dragon, because there's a dragon at the entrance. And that dragon is actually on the coat of arms of the City of London. Now, the City of London has a very interesting feel because it has both ancient, and Amber just showed you the wonderful St. Paul's Cathedral dome there. But then you'll see that in amongst a modern shopping mall, new change. And it shows today that I'm showing you the ancient and modern as we walk through the City of London. Now, the City of London is also quite special because it has its own Lord Mayor of London. And I hope to show you the mayor today, as well as unusual things such as its own police force. The 32 boroughs of London have the Metropolitan Police Force, but the City of London has its own police force, just the city, the square mile, as often we call it. And so as we go down the main thoroughfare, what was a medieval shopping thoroughfare of the city, which is called Cheapside, you may be lucky enough actually to see the police. Actually, it's often very common to see police on horseback. You'll see them over there to the left-hand side. And then you're catching the sort of City of London bobbies with their distinctive helmets. And in fact, they even have their own uniform with brass buttons rather than the traditional silver ones. As you go down Cheapside, cheap itself comes from the ancient Anglo-Saxon or Old English word for marketplace. You will realize that you're now going through streets that used to be where we sold things. So you'll see there Milk Street, Honey Street, Bread Street, Wood Street, and the Poultry, because this was an important area for shopping. Now, as we go down Cheapside, we will look at a church. And if you see that church, you will hear its bells. They are And I'm not going to talk over them because they are rather loud. Those bells are very special and they are loud. And when you go down Cheapside, you know you're in Cheapside because of those bells. But those bells are the bells that if you hear them, and when you are born, the place you are born, you are a true Londoner, you are a true Cockney. And because of the wind direction, that means you have to be born in the City of London or in the East End of London. And that's where you are a Cockney. If you are from South London or West London, you're a Londoner, but you're not a Cockney. Now, this church tower, which was also built by the same architect and scientist that built St Paul's Cathedral, Sir Christopher Wren, is part of a small district of the city called the Cordwainer Ward. And one of the famous inhabitants of that ward is a man called Captain John Smith. And he's the man over to that little left-hand side there. And he was the person who went over and it was involved in setting up the first permanent English settlement in North America, Jamestown. And in fact, he came into contact with the famous Native American princess, Pocahontas. Now, I'm going to do now is take you down. We're going to walk along Cheapside. And as we walk through Cheapside, I'm going to talk to you about the Lord Mayor before we go and meet him. We're on our way to the Guildhall. We actually just say Guildhall. It's never the Guildhall. And this actually is kind of the town hall of the City of London. Now, the Lord Mayor of London, not to be confused with our Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who is kind of like a New York or Chicago style mayor, politician. He controls the 32 boroughs of London. He's involved with decision making there. Our Lord Mayor, a position that goes back to the first one of Henry Fitzalan, back in 1189, is now a kind of ambassador of finance and ambassador of the City of London, as well as the head of the corporation that runs the City of London. So here is the Grand Guildhall where his court is. It's a medieval building, an amazing survival from the Great Fire of London and the Blitz of the Second World War. And those walls, the man who paid for those is another famous Lord Mayor of London. It was Richard Dick Whittington, the man who was Lord Mayor 4 times. And if you like pantomime, he's the one with the cat. But what else takes place in this area? Well, I'm going to introduce you to another group of people, the guilds. And these are the livery companies. And once a year, the livery companies, they're kind of guilds, they have a pancake race on Shrove Tuesday in the Guildhall yard. And these guilds, these ancient societies, are things like different trades, such as goldsmiths and even modern ones like airline pilots. And in fact, in that competition, they take it very, very seriously. They also have a fancy dress competition. And the winner this year, because this is this year's competition, was a man dressed as the rabbit out of Alice in Wonderland. But more seriously, I'm also taking you back in time now to November time, the autumn time, when we're now going to see the swearing in of our Lord Mayor. Now, our Lord Mayor of London, he has a special sword bearer that has a hat, the Muscovy hat, that goes back to the city of trade, the sort of history of trade in the City of London with the Baltic. Our current Lord Mayor, who is actually sworn in a ceremony called the silent ceremony, because there are just a few words and there's no speeches and it's all silent, is emerging out of the entrance here. And what we're going to do now, and he's standing in amongst his 2 sheriffs there, he has to be a sheriff to become Lord Mayor. We're now going to follow him during his procession. So we're going to leave the Guildhall yard, which is so ancient, it even has a Roman amphitheatre underneath it. And we're going to go in the gilded coach you're going to see there. And we're going to go through, we're going to actually see his house. So there is William Russell. In fact, William Russell is going to be a very notable Lord Mayor, because he's going to be a Lord Mayor that's going to serve 2 terms. Usually I serve 1 because of the current COVID crisis. There is his lovely house, the Mansion House, also his office. We're now going to spin around and look up towards our skyscraper district. And what you'll see there is number 22 Bishopsgate, a brand new skyscraper building in the heart of London. But in London, we love to have nicknames for our buildings rather than normal names. So they have ordinary names, but we call the building, first of all, to the left-hand side, the Cheese Grater. we have the scalpel. But the one you'll see next to the church there, we call that the gherkin. Or if you're from the United States and Canada, you'll call it the dill pickle. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom in because we're going to see one of the most important buildings in the City of London. It is the Bank of England, the central bank of the United Kingdom. And what you'll see there is a lady holding the bank, a little building of the bank. She's right on top of the pediment there. And you can also see the coins coming down the side of her leg. She is the old lady of Threadneedle Street, the nickname of the lady. And in fact, if you want to go in the Bank of England, you can to change your old notes. Also, it's famous for its gold vault. Now, what I'm going to do now is we're going to go towards the next stop, which is going to be the monument. Officially, the monument to the Great Fire of London, because the Great Fire in 1666 started in a street very close to this monument. The street was called Pudding Lane, and it started in the bakery of Thomas Fariner. Now, the Pudding Lane is not the pudding you're thinking of, like maybe one with custard that we like to have in the UK. No, it's offal. That's where pudding came from. But this is an amazing monument because you can go up the top and you can observe 311 steps right to the top, and you can see a wonderful view when it finally reopens. I'm zooming you right up to the top there, where you can see the golden urn at the top that shows the fire. That fire started in his bakery and it went out of control, and as Amber mentioned earlier, it burned down a large part of the city. Now, one other person that was alive at that time during the 17th century was a famous man called Samuel Pepys. Now, Samuel Pepys had lots of jobs. He was involved in the Navy, he was involved in science, he was a fellow of the Royal Society, but he's most famous, I would say, for his diary. He wrote diaries and historical events of what took place then. And that church tower you see there is a tower that he climbed, or Hallows by the Tower, or Hallows Barking, to watch that wonderful or dismal event, the Great Fire of London. But before he did that, he made sure he buried his favourite wine and his Parmesan cheese for safety. Now, this church is a church that has some fantastic links to the United States, because if you go in the church, and it is open to the public normally, you go inside a church that summarises the story of the City of London, because it has survived both the Great Fire and the Blitz. You go down into the crypt, there's a small museum, and you'll see a memorial there to William Penn, who was baptized here, the man who went over to found the colony of Pennsylvania. But also, as a US connection, a US president, the 6th president, John Quincy Adams in 1797, got married here to a local girl, an American dad, and then went back over to the United States, eventually to become the President of the United States. So we're now on Tower Hill, and I'm going to pass you over to Will, who'll be doing a wonderful, hopefully, tour of the Tower of London.
Yes, hopefully. So now we are going to the Tower of London, and this is the castle that sits next to the City of London, the city we've just walked through with Aaron. There we're seeing the tower across the river, and you can really see that the tower, while it has got a fantastically strong tower in the centre there, it is in fact made up of lots of different towers, and it is more technically a castle. That central tower, is very important. That was the first part, and now we're going to see the tower itself, the Tower of London, from the air there, thanks to Google Maps, and we can see that they've got that big white tower in the center, and then rings of defense around the tower. This is a really powerful thing. And now we're outlining the white tower because, as I say, that was the first part of the Tower of London. And today we're only really going to get the chance to look at a few of the towers. Because each one of these towers, they have their own story. And as I say, we'll just focus in on a couple of them, maybe 3 or so, and we'll talk about those, and you'll have to come back for the full tour. Now, so the White Tower itself, built by William the Conqueror, the first king that we give a number to, William I, and he was a Norman king. So he had come over from Normandy in France, and he conquered England from the Saxons, who had been in charge up until he came over. And everywhere he went, he needed castles to hold down this nation. So the Tower of London was his tower to hold down London. And there we're seeing the White Tower looking towards us there. And the tower, that White Tower, built in the end of the 11th century, built after the Norman conquest in 1066, has some amazing defensive features. The walls at the base of the tower are 15 feet thick, and just look there, you can see this sloping wall at the bottom there. That's called a glacis. Now that's got two advantages. So one, it's helping to prop up those really thick walls, and also it's helpful for defense. So if you're running at the tower and you're trying to get there to hit it with a battering ram or to put your ladders up, you've got to start at the base of that glacis and try and run up it. And also missiles, like rocks and things that you're throwing from the top of the tower are going to fall, they're going to hit the glacis, and they're going to bounce straight out at attackers. So a really fantastic feature there. Now also looking at the tower, we can see that bulge that's coming out towards us there on this corner. So that we have Henry VIII, in fact, standing in front of it. That's Henry our King from the 1500s, so that's what. So about 500 years after William the Conqueror built the tower. But we're not talking about him right now, sorry. We're talking about that bulge that's coming out towards us, because that shape is there because that's hiding one of the real gems of the White Tower, the chapel that is inside. We're seeing, there we go, the inside there, the chapel of St. John the Evangelist. And that chapel, which William built, is a fantastic survival of Norman architecture that's come down to us, and it's involved in so many stories of Britain, because this is the chapel in which many of our kings set out on their coronation, or they were bathed here the night before their coronation by their Knights of the Bath, and then they set out from the Tower of London across London to Westminster Abbey, where they would be crowned. So very important. But that's not the only thing. And the reason that Henry VIII is on our screen is because of those towers that we can see at the top. In fact, let's put a tower in front of Henry. We've seen enough of him. But you see those turrets that sit around. There are 4 of them, but from here we can see 3. We can see the 2 square ones and the round one that's now covering Henry VIII. And those turrets have on top of them these rather fancy looking domes. Now we sometimes call them the onion domes, but technically I think they're called OG cupolas. And this was well, in the 1500s, in Henry's time, this was a very fancy, sophisticated thing to put on top of your castle. None of the standard crenellations and the sort of standard English look to a castle. Henry, who famously got married 6 times, he actually had these onion domes added for the coronation of his second wife. So that's Anne Boleyn, his second wife of 6. And she really liked all things French. So to really jazz the tower up for her, he added these domes on. In fact, that circular tower that you can see there, that was actually used in later centuries as well as a royal observatory. So one of the astronomer royal gazed out at the stars from that circular tower. And the White Tower is fantastic. It's full of suits of armor. We don't have time for too much on the White Tower. So we've gone now up the steps. We're standing on the steps of the White Tower and we're looking out back across the river. And look at that great view. We can see a couple of towers in front of us, and behind the cityscape of the south bank of London. In fact, in the foreground there, we've got the ravens, but we don't have time for the ravens and their cages today. So if you're looking across there, you can see on the left-hand side, that City Hall. That's where Mayor Sadiq Khan has his offices. And then if you look up, you can see the great shard, like a shard of glass sticking up at the skyline there. Now, if you come down the shard, the tallest building in Western Europe, you'll come down to a square grey turret there, a grey tower called the Bloody Tower. And in fact, we can see it on the map here, so we can see the tower we're talking about. So that's the Bloody Tower there. And the Bloody Tower has a very, very interesting story with it. Now we're seeing the Bloody Tower from, you can see that it's a gatehouse. So on the left-hand side there, you can see the outside of the Bloody Tower and this gateway that we're seeing through here. In fact, so the Bloody Tower built in the 1200s, this this vaulting that we're seeing there, that was added in the 1300s, but it's in the 1400s that it gets its name. Until then, it's been called the Garden Tower. But in the 1400s, we have one of the bloodiest periods of English history, where the House of Lancaster and the House of York fought each other for, well, really for about 30 years, but it was bubbling away for nearly 100. And this was called the Wars of the Roses. And in the late 1400s, it seemed that the House of York was triumphant. House of Lancaster was out of the picture for a while. And this king, Edward IV, he was now in charge. And he was quite popular, quite a playboy king, quite good fun, great on the battlefield. Everyone loved him, but maybe he was a bit too much of a playboy, and he had an early demise. And so his brother Richard came down from the northern borders to be regent of the country, and he was there to technically to look after Edward's. There's Richard, and to look after Edward's young sons, the Duke of York and Edward V now, but Richard took those boys into the tower. They were housed in the Garden Tower as it was then. And while they were seen playing on the greens of the tower that summer, they were seen less and less after a while. And then when asked to produce the boys, Richard could not. He declared them illegitimate and declared himself Richard III of England. And those boys were never heard of again. And so the tower gets its bloody name because of the heinous deeds that maybe Richard or maybe one of his men did there in the grounds of the tower. But that's just, there have been several people who have stayed in that tower as prisoners and the like, and we could have all of their stories now, but just for a last look at the tower, we're going to move on to one of my favorite parts of the tower, the medieval palace. Now you can see it down the bottom there. This is composed of 3 towers and a section of wall. So you've got St. Thomas's Tower, named after Archbishop Thomas Becket. You've got the Wakefield Tower, named after a battle in the Wars of the Roses, so that conflict we've just heard about, and the Lanthorn Tower at the end there. And that was where the Queens of England stayed, while their husband was either staying in St. Thomas's Tower or in the Wakefield Tower. And the Tower of London have put the towers back to this fantastic look that we're seeing now on the screen. They've basically returned them to how they might have looked in the reigns of some of those early kings. So this room we're looking at now in St. Thomas's Tower looks like the bedchamber of our King Edward I, Edward, Hammer of the Scots, and Long Shanks. Here on the left we can see a knight looking at a mappa mundi, a map of the world as they saw it back then. And we can actually see the Queen, Queen Isabella of France, Edward's second wife, and 2 of his ladies relaxing there in the bedroom. And now we're going to move on to the Wakefield Tower. And you saw there the actors, and those actors are something that the Tower of London provides historical interpreters to really bring history to life. But now we're in the Wakefield Tower, and you can see the Wakefield Tower used to be a place where the crown jewels were stored, and you can see them on the right hand of the screen there. And also it now houses a replica of the coronation chair. So if you watched last week's broadcast and you saw Nick giving his tour of Westminster Abbey, you'd have seen the real coronation chair. But this is a replica of how it would have looked when Edward I had it made. Now, just as a final thing, we're going to see a little video of some of those historical interpreters. This is actually taken on the last day that the tower was open before lockdown. And they're going to give us a little song, and we're just going to think about all those things that we can't see at the moment due to lockdown. So thanks, let's have that video.
But thank you all very much. Thank you all 3 of you. I'll bring you all back. I shall get rid of What an evocative way to end our tour, Will. Some people have pointed out actually that some of those kings and queens, or some of the kings from previous years, look a bit familiar. Are they any relation to you?
Yeah, so I did work at the Tower of London as a historical interpreter as well. So yes, I was a couple of those figures you saw, but I wasn't singing. That was
no singing. So what when you were showing people around the tower, what were the things that most excited them when you were there?
Well, I mean, people really do love engaging with historic figures. You've got tales of the crown jewels being stolen by Colonel Blood and things like that, and I mean that's always a great one to keep people going. But obviously, as well, there's the rather sadder tales of the executions that took place there. People always feel something quite strong when they get to Tower Green and see the execution site there as well.
It's quite amazing, isn't it? You've heard of these people in history, you've learned about them at school, and suddenly you're standing at the place where these momentous events happened. Really feel part of history. Aaron, thank you for that walk. You mentioned the Romans. There are some Roman ruins at the Guildhall. If you want to go and see those, is that possible?
Yes. In fact, you can see them for free. It's fantastic. So what you do is you go in through the Guildhall Art Gallery. And once you pass through security, you go down the steps, and underneath there is the preserved remains of part of that amphitheatre. And you can imagine you're there with the gladiators in London.
Wow. What's your favourite building when you're showing people around the City of London?
Well, I have to say it is St Paul's Cathedral. I love it very much, and I think it's just a beautiful building and a symbol of London.
Stunning. And Amber gave us that little taster of the tour there. So Amber, when you go into St Paul's Cathedral, what is the thing that's most spectacular for you?
I mean, it's got to be that first glimpse down the nave, and just seeing the space open up in front of you, and then you get that, or a second time when you get to the dome as well, and you look up and you see that as well.
And you can, of course, climb up to the top of the outside of the dome. How long does that take? And is it worth it?
It's definitely worth it. The only way to get to the top is by the stairs, and there are about 528 of them. So make sure that you've got the energy for it. But the views across London are absolutely stunning.
It is amazing. You stand up there, your whole of the City of London is set out below you at your feet. Thank you all very much for giving us a little taster of what a virtual tour can look like. So if you want to plan your own virtual tour, then don't forget the guides can tailor it to your own requirements. What you have to do, the first thing you need to do is go to our website, and I can show you the front page here. It's at guidelondon.org.uk. If you look up at the top of the page, you can see London Virtual Tour just under the title here. If you click on that, it will take you to the virtual tours page. There's a little list of some of the various tours you could do. Don't forget that tours can be made for your own convenience. If there's something you're really interested in, then talk to the guide, let them know what you'd like to see, and they can arrange a tour around your own requirements. Most important thing is down at the bottom, there's a form to fill in. All you need to do is say when you want the tour, what time of day you want. Make sure the virtual tour box is ticked. Make sure you leave us your email address so that we can get in contact with you. And if you've got any special requirements, if you've got access problems, that doesn't matter on the virtual tour, does it? We can show you whatever you want to see. So if there's anything you particularly want to see on the tour, just let us know. And what will happen is that will go into our system. It will go to 3 Blue Badge London guides, and they will then contact you, and they shall let you know exactly what they can do to help you get your virtual tour. So go onto the website now, have a look. It costs nothing to get in touch with the guides. You're not committed, so you can find out what they can offer, how much it will cost, and hopefully you'll come on a virtual tour with us soon. So thank you very much to Will, to Amber, and to Aaron for giving us a little taste of the tours today. We're going to be back on Friday. On Friday, we're going to be talking about fashion and shopping in London. And then next week, we're going to have some more examples of some different types of virtual tours that you can go on. So thank you very much for watching us today. Do come back soon and share these videos with all your friends and your family as well. But from all of us now, for the moment, goodbye.
Bye-bye.